According to Article 100 of the National Electrical Code, a damp location is defined as places where occasional temporary condensation of moisture can be expected on walls and other surfaces, but not places where the condensation is so heavy or of such frequency as to constitute a wet location. NEC 210.52 D2 states that porches, balconies, and open patios shall have lighting outlets. NEC 210.8A requires ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection for all 120-volt single-phase, 15 and 20 ampere receptacles installed outdoors. NEC 210.8 Bone requires GFCI protection for all 120-volt single-phase, 15 and 20 ampere receptacles installed in damp locations. Bubble covers are not explicitly required by the NEC for receptacles in damp locations. However, they can provide additional protection against moisture and dirt. Switches themselves do not require GFCI protection. However, switches installed in damp locations should be weather resistant. According to NEC 410.4A, ceiling fans installed in damp locations must be listed for wet locations. Also, NEC 410.42 states that luminaires installed in damp locations must be listed for damp locations. There is an exception, however. For unheated basements, crawl spaces, attics, and similar spaces, luminaires listed for dry locations only shall be permitted to be installed recessed as part of an approved ceiling assembly. In conclusion, based on the NEC requirements, 3-season porches would be considered damp locations. Therefore, the following is necessary. Firstly, all 120 volts receptacles must be GFCI protected. Secondly, weather-resistant switches should be used. Thirdly, ceiling fans and light fixtures must be listed for damp locations unless an exception applies. Finally, bubble covers for receptacles are not required, but they can provide additional protection. Let's delve into each of these points in more detail to ensure a comprehensive understanding. Starting with the GFCI protection for 120 volts receptacles. The reason GFCI protection is mandated in damp locations is to mitigate the risk of electrical shock. A GFCI device constantly monitors the current flowing through a circuit. If it detects any imbalance, indicating that current is leaking to ground, which could happen if someone touches a live wire or a wet surface, it quickly trips the circuit, cutting off the power and preventing a potentially fatal shock. The threshold for tripping is very low, typically around 5 milliamps, making it highly sensitive and effective. It's important to note that GFCI protection is required for all 120 volts, single-phase, 15 and 20 ampere receptacles. This covers most standard outlets used for plugging in common household devices. Higher voltage or amperage circuits might have different protection requirements, but for the typical 3-season porch setup, these are the ones to focus on. When installing GFCI receptacles, ensure they are readily accessible for testing and resetting. Most GFCI receptacles have test and reset buttons on the face of the device. Regular testing, typically once a month, is recommended to ensure the device is functioning correctly. To test, simply press the test button. The receptacle should trip, cutting off power to the outlet. Then press the reset button to restore power. If the GFCI receptacle doesn't trip when you press the test button, it may be faulty and should be replaced. Next, let's consider weather-resistant switches. Although the NEC doesn't require GFCI protection for switches, it does specify that switches in damp locations should be weather-resistant. This means that the switches are designed to withstand exposure to moisture and humidity without corroding or malfunctioning. Weather-resistant switches typically have a protective coating or housing that prevents water from entering the switch mechanism. They may also have tighter seals around the toggle or rocker to keep out moisture. When selecting switches for a 3-season porch, look for ones that are specifically labeled as weather-resistant or suitable for damp locations. These switches are more likely to withstand the elements and provide reliable performance over time. In addition to weather resistance, consider the type of switch you need. Standard toggle switches are common, but rocker switches can be easier to operate, especially if you have limited dexterity. Dimmer switches can also be a good option for controlling the brightness of lights in the porch, creating a more comfortable ambience. Now let's discuss ceiling fans and light fixtures. The NEC requires that ceiling fans installed in damp locations must be listed for wet locations. This may seem counterintuitive, since a three-season porch is considered a damp location, not a wet location. However, the intent of the code is to provide an extra margin of safety. Ceiling fans that are listed for wet locations are designed to withstand direct exposure to rain and snow, so they are more than capable of handling the humidity and condensation that may occur on a three-season porch. Light fixtures, on the other hand, must be listed for damp locations unless an exception applies. This means that the light fixture is designed to withstand exposure to moisture and humidity without corroding or malfunctioning. Damp-rated light fixtures typically have a sealed housing that prevents water from entering the fixture. They may also have a protective coating on the metal parts to prevent corrosion. When selecting light fixtures for a three-season porch, look for ones that are specifically labeled as damp-rated. These fixtures are more likely to withstand the elements and provide reliable performance over time. The exception to the damp-rated requirement applies to unheated basements, crawl spaces, attics, and similar spaces. In these locations, luminaires listed for dry locations only shall be permitted to be installed recessed as part of an approved ceiling assembly. This exception is based on the assumption that recessed luminaires in these spaces are less likely to be exposed to moisture. Finally, let's touch on bubble covers for receptacles. Although bubble covers are not required by the NEC for receptacles in damp locations, they can provide additional protection against moisture and dirt. A bubble cover is a clear plastic cover that fits over the receptacle, providing a watertight seal. This can be especially useful in areas that are exposed to rain or snow. When selecting bubble covers, make sure they are compatible with the receptacles you are using. Some bubble covers are designed for standard receptacles, while others are designed for GFCI receptacles. Also, consider the type of bubble cover you need. Some bubble covers are designed to be used with the receptacle in the open position, while others are designed to be used with the receptacle in the closed position. In summary, when wiring a three-season porch, it's important to follow the NEC requirements for damp locations. This includes providing GFCI protection for all 120 volts receptacles, using weather-resistant switches, and selecting ceiling fans and light fixtures that are listed for wet or damp locations as appropriate. While bubble covers are not required, they can provide additional protection against moisture and dirt. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that your three-season porch is wired safely and in accordance with the electrical code. Remember to always consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns about wiring your three-season porch. The electricity can be dangerous, and it's important to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and your family. Let's break down the implications of each requirement to provide a clear understanding. Regarding GFCI protection, it is not simply a suggestion but a mandatory safety measure. The fundamental purpose of a GFCI is to protect people from potentially fatal electrical shocks. This is particularly critical in damp locations like three-season porches, where moisture can increase the risk of electrical current finding a path to ground through a person. Installing GFCI receptacles correctly is essential. They should be installed by someone who understands electrical wiring, and they must be properly grounded. Furthermore, it's advisable to test the GFCI upon installation and monthly thereafter to ensure it's functioning correctly. A malfunctioning GFCI provides no protection. Weather-resistant switches are crucial for longevity and safety. Standard switches are not designed to withstand the constant exposure to humidity and temperature fluctuations that are common in three-season porches. Over time, moisture can corrode the internal components of a standard switch, leading to failure or, in severe cases, creating a fire hazard. Weather-resistant switches are constructed with materials and seals that protect them from these environmental factors, ensuring they operate safely and reliably for years. When it comes to selecting ceiling fans and light fixtures, understanding the difference between wet-rated and damp-rated is essential. Wet-rated fixtures are designed to withstand direct exposure to water, such as rain or snow. Damp-rated fixtures, on the other hand, are designed to withstand humidity and condensation, but not direct water exposure. While a three-season porch is technically a damp location, using wet-rated fixtures for ceiling fans provides an extra layer of protection, as they are built to a higher standard of water resistance. Light fixtures specifically need to be damp-rated to handle the environmental conditions. The exception for dry-rated recessed luminaires and unheated spaces is based on the assumption that these fixtures are less likely to be exposed to moisture. However, it's important to ensure that the ceiling assembly is properly sealed to prevent moisture from entering the recessed space. Bubble covers, while not mandated, are a practical addition that can significantly extend the lifespan of your outdoor receptacles. They offer a physical barrier against rain, snow, dirt, and insects, all of which can damage the receptacle over time. They are especially useful in areas prone to heavy rainfall or where insects are prevalent. When choosing bubble covers, ensure they are compatible with the type of receptacles you are using, whether standard or GFCI. Moreover, it is always a good practice to keep up to date on the most recent electrical code. Electrical codes can be updated as technology advances. Also, it is important to note that electrical code is not uniform across the country. Local jurisdictions may add to or modify the national code, so always consult with your local building department or a qualified electrician to ensure compliance with local requirements. When in doubt, it's always better to err on the side of caution. Over-engineering a system for added safety is not a bad thing when it comes to the electrical system. Also, always hire a licensed professional. Working with electricity can be dangerous. Unless you have extensive knowledge and experience in electrical wiring, it's always best to hire a licensed electrician to perform the work. A qualified electrician will ensure that the wiring is done safely and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. They will also be able to identify and correct any potential hazards. Furthermore, they will be able to use specialized tools to ensure safe electrical work. Also, consider the future needs of your porch. Plan for potential future electrical needs when wiring your three-season porch. Consider whether you might want to add additional outlets, lighting, or ceiling fans in the future. It's easier and more cost-effective to run extra wiring during the initial installation than to add it later. Additionally, consider the placement of outlets and switches for maximum convenience and usability. By taking the time to plan carefully, you can create a three-season porch that is both safe and functional. Also, document the wiring. Keep a detailed record of the wiring layout, including the location of outlets, switches, and junction boxes. This will be helpful for future maintenance and repairs. You can create a simple diagram or take photos of the wiring before the walls are closed up. Store the documentation in a safe place where it can be easily accessed. Remember to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions when installing electrical components. This will ensure that the components are installed correctly and safely. It will also help to avoid any potential problems or hazards. Also, double-check all connections. Before energizing any circuits, double-check all connections to ensure they are tight and secure. Loose connections can cause overheating, arcing, and potentially fires. Use a torque screwdriver to tighten connections to the manufacturer's specifications. Doing so ensures safety and reliability. Finally, consider surge protection. Surge protection can help protect your electrical equipment from damage caused by power surges. Power surges can be caused by lightning strikes, utility switching, or other events. Surge protectors can be installed at the service entrance or at individual outlets. Consider using surge protectors to protect sensitive electronic equipment such as televisions, computers, and audio equipment. To reiterate, wiring a three-season porch requires careful attention to detail and adherence to the NEC and local codes. By following these guidelines and consulting with a qualified electrician, you can ensure that your porch is wired safely and in compliance with all applicable regulations. Finally, always remember the importance of safety first when working with electricity.